Money in the Bank is a tried and true tradition in the yearly calendar for WWE. Once a part of the WrestleMania card, the stipulation has transcended the showcase of the Immortals to become an event often looked forward to as much as the Big Four, and every single year we all sit back and speculate about who will win the coveted briefcase. So today I'm gonna be doing just that as I discuss who I feel needs to win both the men's and the women's Money in the Bank contracts. With that being said, be sure to let me know who you think is deserving of the honor down below in the comments, and if you'd please, I'd really appreciate a like on this video as it tells me you enjoy this sort of content. Rightio, so let's first talk about the women, of which there are a few standouts which I feel could realistically come in and capture the contract. To start off strong, let's talk about Jade Cargill, who as of Clash at the Castle no longer holds a championship, having lost in a triple threat match to Alba Fire and Isla Dawn. Now, if you didn't know, Jade comes from a fairly successful wrestling career over in AEW, which made the acquisition of her by the WWE into a fairly massive deal. However, since then, she has had to go through and essentially be retrained to better suit the WWE style of wrestling. This is why she took as long as she did to properly debut on the main roster, as well as why she botched moves as often as she did during that title match at Clash at the Castle. You know, in addition to the ropes being a bit loose. So, while I'm certain she will one day hold a women's world title in the WWE, I'm fairly sure she could use a bit more time getting her ring work together before it catches up to the rest of her package as a performer. However, one woman who is absolutely the total package may be making her return from injury fairly shortly, that being the Eradicator Rhea Ripley. See, Ripley was forced to vacate her Women's World Championship after sustaining a shoulder injury in a segment with Liv Morgan, who has basically been independently keeping the wheel spinning for their inevitable title clash. I doubt Mommy has taken very kindly to Liv trying to take a bite out of Dom Dom while trying to seduce him in the rest of Judgment Day. As well as, you know, she kinda sorta snatched the Women's World title away while Rhea was out injured, thus pulling together all the makings for what will absolutely be a wonderful match and feud as soon as that shoulder is set to go. The only question is when that'll happen, as crucially Ripley didn't undergo surgery, with hopes that by rehabbing it she would be able to make a return to the ring sooner, meaning that with Money in the Bank only being a few weeks away, that Mommy might not be ready to go by then, but even still I wouldn't quite count her out. Another wrestler who I might as well mention here while we're on the topic of injured female superstars is none other than the Queen Charlotte Flair, who has been out of action with multiple injuries since December of last year. Now, as far as the return time for her sorts of injuries, they can vary some. Notably, however, the early time frames for recovery and potential clearance from said injuries is in the range of about 6 months, which, wouldn't you know it, is right around now, meaning we could theoretically have the Queen back any moment now. Mind you again that those are early markers, meaning that it could take until Rumble season next year before we catch sight of her in a squared circle. But considering she's essentially the Roman Reigns of the women's division, I just didn't want to leave her out even if it's only for the slimmest chance of her winning. Plus, I can see Hunter giving one of his main original NXT girls that sort of accolade, if only to add another to her legendary career. However, the woman I am most confident we see walk into and out of Money in the Bank with the briefcase is none other than Tiffany Stratton. Tiffy Time has been a constant fixture on our television set since debuting on the main roster in January, and ever since she's been a woman to look out for as a potential challenger and, dare I say, likely headliner for the women's division. Having been one of NXT 2.0's most notable and incredible athletes turned pro wrestlers, it has been woefully apparent that a star her caliber would receive a fairly sizable push once elevated to the main roster. She has, of course, mixed it up in the Women's Elimination Chamber, as well as more recently hovered around Bayley and the WWE Women's Championship. Out of all the women I've listed thus far, it stands to reason that she would absolutely stand to gain the most out of a run as Miss Money in the Bank. The only thing that could theoretically stand in her way are some offhanded comments she made about Jade Cargill months ago, which definitely weren't the kinds of things that you'd want your top stars to be saying when they're meant to potentially represent your company at the highest level possible. Even still, I reckon it is Tiffany who needs to capture the contract. And perhaps if not her, it would also be a ton of fun to see Chelsea Green with it, if only for the segments of her holding the contract and ideally her getting thwarted at every opportunity when attempting to cash in. Anyways, yeah, ultimately I do reckon Tiffany Stratton is the woman who needs to win the Money in the Bank most of all. But what does that say about the men? Well, there certainly are a number of names I could see grabbing the briefcase, and to start us off, why not start with one that's already done it? See, back when the contract was up for grabs at Mania, crucially in the years 2008 through 2009, it was none other than a younger CM Punk who pulled the briefcase down both years. Now, him winning today was seemingly way more likely going into Clash at the Castle, with the potential scenario being that Drew McIntyre wrestled the World Heavyweight Championship away from Damian Priest, and then the 2024 Hater of the Year CM Punk could theoretically have captured the contract strictly to antagonize Drew. Generally speaking, I really don't think their feud needs the title, but considering it's been McIntyre's main character motivation for the last 6 months or so, it would be a nice additional reason for the Scotsman to chase down Punk. Regardless though, I'd rank Punk rather low on the list of guys who really need or should win the Money in the Bank contract this year. And while an ex-thorn in the side of authority isn't the guy I'd want to see carry the briefcase this year, Adam Pearce's latest problem child is. If you don't know who I'm talking about, they'll have to break it to you that I'm speaking of none other than Braun Breaker. See, Braun is the sort of guy who I can really imagine winning a world title in his first few years on the main roster, especially given the current era is that of change and the rising of stars. Notably, a lot of folks online are comparing Braun to a young Brock Lesnar, and are suitably referring to him as the next big thing. And hey, let's call a spade here. Braun is the sort of guy who you can practically build the next decade or so of wrestling around in a similar fashion to what we've seen with past megastars. My boy is only 26 years old, and it's hard to not see him as the total package. Is the time right now to pull the trigger and strap the rocket on him? Well, considering his current feud with management on Raw and Adam Pearce seemingly punishing the genetic freak for his actions against guys like Ricochet, I'm really not sure if he's going to put a guy like Braun in a matchup with weapons at his disposal. So I give him a solid maybe. However, another man who's had a history of issues with management who I could realistically see making his way into the match is none other than Randy Orton. Now, keen-eyed viewers for Clash at the Castle made note of Randy's expression towards the WWE title on Cody Rhodes' shoulder after making the save for the American Nightmare against the Bloodline. And pretty much since Cody came back to the WWE, an inevitable dream match that has been pitched to the moon and back is of course between these two ex-legacy peers. There is a surplus of history between the pair dating back to 2008, and with Cody's first run the WWE ending without him being remotely near his final form, it absolutely stands to reason that this clash would absolutely sell out an arena and get many an eager fan on the edge of their seats. Orton in particular has already won the briefcase once, and while a legend like Randy certainly doesn't need the contract to constitute him getting an opportunity at the title, it could be quite the fun little story by having the veteran Orton cashing in on his former protege to capture his 15th world title. With Orton then acting as a heel, they could have their proper matchup down the line where Rhodes would likely pick up the title from Orton once more. Conversely to Orton, who doesn't really need any more accolades to add to his illustrious career, one of the guys who I really think needs to win Money in the Bank this year is somewhat lacking in that department. That guy is none other than Jey Uso. Now, I know some folks may groan at this being even a consideration, but if I'm being honest, Jey has been a highlight on Raw for the better part of the last 6 months for me. Do not get me wrong, there have been misses with him, such as his Mania match against his brother, which was pretty underwhelming to say the least. However, there's something really great about his current run. The guy gets the biggest reactions on Raw currently, and it's abundantly clear that the live crowds love him. Plus, he's been remarkably consistent in his performances on TV. It also seems a little odd the guy's been nicknamed Main Event Jey Uso, despite never really winning a big main event. So him picking up the contract would be fairly good in elevating him to that top spot, and even give him a solid way to become World Heavyweight Champion. Now, the second to last name I really want to talk about here as someone who needs to win the Money in the Bank contract is Finn Balor. Listen, I totally understand the criticism that Finn has lost pretty much every big match he's been in for the better part of a year. However, the dissension in the Judgment Day all started with the Money in the Bank contract when Finn was challenging Seth for the world title. Finn simply couldn't trust Damian not to cash in, and well, there's something interesting to be explored here with the shoe being on the other foot, or briefcase being in the other hand in this case. Damian, as of late, has basically told the rest of Judgment Day that he doesn't need them to win, that he can retain his title on his own, and generally has been pushing his weight around a lot more since becoming champion, as well as he's basically been the de facto leader of Judgment Day with Rhea being out. I can certainly see Finn winning the contract causing a further rift in the Judgment Day, which can only lead to one thing: Finn and Damian feuding over that big gold belt and working to elevate it to that next level. And the final name I want to talk about here today as someone I can realistically see winning Money in the Bank and also doing something to elevate a championship with it is my boy Chad Gable. See, much like pretty much everyone I've mentioned so far, Chad has been putting on amazing performances, especially since his heel turn, which has made for some incredible TV, and frankly the best feud the Intercontinental title has seen since Dolph and The Miz back in 2016. Chad is borderline obsessed with the Intercontinental title, and while I largely think cashing in on a mid-card title is a mistake for the contract, there's a good few reasons I think this can make sense. First, Sammy pretty clearly indicated Chad wouldn't be getting another opportunity at the title, which means Gable would need to find another means to get himself in a title match for the IC Championship. Second, if Chad won the briefcase, the story with the IC title has very clearly been personal for him, and seeing him go after another title before getting his hands on this one wouldn't exactly feel right in my opinion. Honestly, it paints quite the beautiful picture for a performer to want the Intercontinental title more than all of the world titles and choose to specifically go for that belt, not because he can't win the big ones like how Austin Theory couldn't, but instead because the Intercontinental title just means more. But that's just what I think. Who do you think needs to win the men's and women's Money in the Bank contracts more than their peers this year? Let me know in the comments down below, and hey ho, while you're headed down that way, it would help me out immeasurably if you consider leaving a like on the video, as it tells me you like this sort of content and I should look to do more like it. Oh, and be sure to subscribe so you can catch the next upload if you liked what you saw. Anywho, I'm gonna dip, so as always, I hope you stay safe, and that was Dylightful.